Good evening, James Morrow here, filling in for Paul Murray live for the entire week. So let's get straight into it. We're going to do a big dive into Albo's big trip to China in just a minute. And I've got two of your favorites on the show tonight, Gemma Tognini and Christy McSweeney, here to have a lot of fun this Sunday night as we kick the week off. Plus, one of the most brilliant thinkers and writers on China, Paul Monk, to look at what is really going on and what sort of bill Albo may be putting us on the hook to keep everything sweet with Xi Jinping. But first, I did say it's Sunday, and so you know what? We should start off with, a little bit of fun to end the weekend. Chase those Sunday scaries away. And this happened just a few hours ago, and I wanted to share it with you. This was at the Turning Point USA conference in Tampa, Florida. What you're going to see is one of the greatest slapdowns of a heckler of all time. On the stage, U.S. Border Czar Tom Homan, and in the audience, one protester who bit off a bit more than he could chew. First, let's have a look at the heckle.
Let's release them in the community. Wait 3 or 5 years.
Member.
Pardon me?
Are you an MS-13 member? It says so.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. I got a question. No. I got a question for you. Why don't you come up here and hand me that picture? Bring it.
Okay, so you've got some Yahoo yelling about MS-13 or something, and then Homan turns the tables. After leading the crowd in a USA, USA chant, Homan then proceeds to lay down the law.
All right. You got morons like this all over the country. This guy wouldn't like to serve his nation. This guy ain't got the balls to be an ICE officer. He hasn't got the balls to be a Border Patrol agent.
But Homan wasn't done yet.
This guy lives in his mother's basement. The only thing that surprises me, you don't have purple hair and a nose ring. Get out of here, you loser. And you're such a badass. Meet me off stage in 13 minutes and 50 seconds.
And then Homan delivered the coup de grace.
I guarantee you he sits down to pee. Guaranteed.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I am not taking that bet. And by the way, keep an eye on that conference overnight and tomorrow. I reckon there's going to be some wild stuff thrown around back and forth over that Epstein list too, which maybe we'll check out tomorrow night. We'll check in on that. But in the meantime, I want you to have a look at this picture. Look, Ma, I'm a diplomat. There you have it. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese posted it to his social media a little while ago. He's there in Shanghai with Chen Jining, the Communist Party secretary of Shanghai. So basically, we're talking about the mayor, if the mayor could have you thrown in a gulag for thought crimes, which I guess I better say, hey, sorry, Clover Moore, I didn't mean it. Check out that body language there. Albo all leaning in, Secretary Chen leaning back, imperious, looking down the barrel of the camera like, who is this guy, and why does he want to shake my hand so bad? Honestly, the Prime Minister would look less desperate if he was trying to get Cardi B's autograph at the Met Gala. The Prime Minister also posted this little video of himself on the banks of Shanghai's Huangpu River today, trying to set the terms of this trip that he's on right now to China. Have a look and see if you can tell me what do they say, problematic here.
I'm here in Shanghai, China, supporting Australian businesses, supporting Australian jobs, and supporting our economy. We know that 1 in 4 of Australia's jobs depends upon free and fair trade. And our biggest export partner is China. So here I've brought a whole range of businesses with us, from the resources sector, tourism and education, all engaging with China in a constructive way in order to boost our economic benefit. Engaging with China is in our interests to build a stable and secure region. Here, over the next few days, what I'm doing is building on that relationship to the benefit of Australian jobs and the Australian economy.
Yeah, so it's all about jobs and growth. Funny, where have I heard that before? Anyway, yet, no matter how much he pushes this line that this trip is just about economics and doing business, well, there's also a broader context to this here. Because this trip that Anthony Albanese has taken to China, 6 days, the longest trip, I think, as they've been saying, in living memory of any prime minister to China, with no stop into any of our North Asian allies like the Japanese or the South Koreans, well, it also suggests there's something much more broad happening in terms of the way Anthony Albanese is pulling Australia away from the United States. You caught a little bit there when he's hinted around free trade and all of that, which I'm going to get to in a moment. You see, the problem here is that Anthony Albanese believes he can walk this sort of fine line where he has Australia do all sorts of trade with China, indeed become increasingly dependent on China, while at the same time enjoying the benefits of the American security umbrella, even as everything he does says that he is pulling Australia away from the United States and that mean old Donald Trump and his nasty tariffs. Look, Albanese will deny this uphill and down dale, but this is what is happening. You can see it. Just look at the way Albanese deals with both countries. Albanese had this to say today in Shanghai.
Our alliance with the United States is a very important one for Australia. So we'll continue to engage constructively in a coherent, stable, orderly way. That's the way I conduct this government.
Ah, yes, an important alliance conducted coherently, stably, and orderly, and also, I would say, in a manner that has been entirely flat-footed. Now, let's play a little game of compare and contrast here. That was just Anthony Albanese talking about America in that context, but here's Anthony Albanese 3 months ago when Donald Trump slapped unilateral tariffs on Australia and a whole bunch of other nations as well as part of the whole Liberation Day economic program.
The administration's tariffs have no basis in logic, and they go against the basis of our two nations partnership. This is not the act of a friend.
Not the act of a friend. Tough talk. He's laid down that marker. That's how you deal with an ally that doesn't treat you well. But now, of course, contrast this with the way the Prime Minister reacted to another event. Say, a fleet of spy ships that were pretty clearly mapping our island nation's weaknesses and choke points circling Australia earlier this year.
What does monitoring actually mean?
What it means is that the Australian Defence Force are monitoring what is happening. It's going from New Zealand. We expect it to go around to China, around that way.
And do you have concerns about it, Mr. Albanese?
Here you go. Of course, I would prefer that it wasn't there, but we live in circumstances where, just as Australia has vessels in the South China Sea and vessels in the Taiwan Strait and a range of areas, this vessel is there.
Spot the difference there. We've gone from not the act of a friend about Donald Trump and his tariffs to, well, we would prefer it wasn't there about a Chinese spy ship. Now, the Prime Minister was also quick to reassure everyone, you'll recall, that this spy ship was perfectly fine and normal and in keeping with international law. Still believe in international law? That's sweet. Note also the moral equivalence he drew there between our freedom of movement exercises in the South China Sea and China's blatant spying. Recall also, too, that Albanese claimed Australia received civilian and military notifications about Chinese live-fire drills in the Tasman Sea, quote, at around the same time a Virgin pilot reported the activity earlier this year. This despite it later coming out that the chief of the Australian Defence Force, well, he told the Senate estimates that the military notification came an hour after the commercial pilot, that Virgin Australia pilot, let the authorities know what was going on. And again, I have to ask, was that the act of a friend? The circumnavigation of the spy ship, the no notification about live fire action in the Tasman Sea? These sorts of things, the act of a friend? Well, if not, I would have expected Anthony Albanese to call that out, just to be consistent. But look, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this is just the Prime Minister playing to his domestic audience of Trump haters in the Labour Party. I mean, it worked so well for him in the election, didn't it? But this is serious business. The message Anthony Albanese is sending to the world is that he will bend over backwards to defend China's actions, no matter how irresponsible they are, how aggressive they are, how bullying they are. But at the same time, he is happy to fire up and take a swing at Donald Trump and the Trump administration. Now, back in May, Albanese ducked the chance to meet with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance at the funeral of the late Holy Father Pope Francis in Rome. This is what he had to say when asked why he didn't try and meet with the second most powerful man in the Trump administration, the democratically elected, and I might add, J.D. Vance.
That's well, I'm the Prime Minister. I met the President of the United States, and that will occur at an appropriate time.
Ah, yes, well, he meets with the President. He won't meet with any underlings. Yet, check this out. Although Albanese will get the chance, oh goody, to meet Xi Jinping again, I think this is the fourth time the two are going to get together. The actual formal talks between Albanese and the Chinese government will take place with China represented by this man, Li Kang, China's premier, someone who is very much the number two guy. So if it's not okay to meet with America's 2IC, well, okay, but then when it comes to China, well, the whole thing changes. Yes, sir, happy to meet with whomever's available, Mr. Xi. Now, don't think, by the way, that this eager puppy dog elbow routine is playing with the Chinese and he's repeated snubbing of America, even if only for domestic consumption here in Australia, has gone unnoticed in the United States. Now, you probably know, of course, that AUKUS is under review by the White House. Personally, I think that is going to wind up being okay because, of course, every new administration is going to want to review their defense priorities. So I don't think there should be too much panic there just yet. But I'd also point out that there was also this today. News that the Pentagon has confirmed it is asking Australia for undertakings on how its AUKUS submarines would be used in the event of U.S. military conflicts and for substantial increases in defense spending as part of their review of that $368 billion agreement. In other words, the U.S. wants to know if we are in or if we are out. And, I don't blame them. I don't know that they would be asking these sorts of tough questions, frankly, if it were not for the recent behavior of the Albanese government. Now, today on Insiders, Acting Defense Minister Pat Conroy had this to say about Australia joining in the fight if China, say, invades Taiwan.
The sole power to commit Australia to war or to allow our territory to be used for a conflict is the elected government of the day. That is our position. Sovereignty will always be prioritised, and that will continue to be our position.
Look, he's right. Conroy is absolutely right there. Sovereignty is number one here. But the decision on whether or not to go to war, while it may be one that ultimately Australia should have the choice on, the fact of the matter is that you don't always get that choice. History shows we don't always have that sort of luxury. And he also said this about what an ideal world would look like for Australia.
We are being very clear that we want a balanced region where no one is dominated and no one dominates.
Pacific where no one is dominating and no one is dominated. Well, you see, this is where I think we start to get into some trouble, some real murky waters here. Because the fact of the matter is, you know, balancing these two, the United States and China, well, this moral equivalence thing, with when you've got on one side a live fire exercise with zero notice or a circumnavigating spy convoy, and saying that that's no different, for example, as we saw before, to Australian or British or American navies maintaining freedom of movement exercises in the South China Sea, well, that's bonkers. And it comes back to this very reductive model that sees our entire relationship with China now as being an economic one. And I'm sorry, that just doesn't work. I know Albanese is trying to avoid picking a side here, but he is going to have to. Remember this.
I'm here in Shanghai, China, supporting Australian businesses, supporting Australian jobs, and supporting our economy. We know that 1 in 4 of Australia's jobs depends upon free and fair trade, and our biggest export partner is China.
Yep, it's all about the Benjamins there, isn't it, Albo? No moral judgment about China, and in fact, a sidelong swipe at the U.S. You know, that whole free and fair trade line. Maybe he's just implying, and this is what I'm really worried about. But when you look at the direction that this is taking, if you look at the trajectory this government is taking with all of this, well, it's starting to coalesce around this idea that maybe, just maybe, they think that we could have a better deal with Beijing in the long run. I mean, that does start to seem to be the vibe. We can trade with them, we can keep doing business with them, and nothing should be allowed to upset the apple cart, while at the same time, well, the United States and Donald Trump and all of that, you know, let's just keep getting into punch-ups with them while ducking actually taking a meeting with the president. I think this is a terrible strategy, yet this is the problem. Labor has done such a comprehensive job of running down any idea of what we are and who we are as a nation, for what we stand for, beyond just this sort of narrative of, you know, basically, if you listen to what Labor says, we're just a GDP and a dormitory for migrants with a bit of Aboriginal history thrown in. That's all we are. Well, we don't then have the language anymore to stand up and talk about things like freedom and democracy and human rights and things that once upon a time this nation cared about, because we saw ourselves as part of the West and as a nation that believed in these Western democratic traditions. Well, we don't have that language anymore, it seems, to stand up and say, actually, China, look, we'll do business with you, we'll trade with you, but you know what? Under your current government of the Chinese Communist Party and the way that government behaves, we can't trust that government. And that actually, given the CCP's treatment of Australia in the past, the wolf warrior diplomacy, the interference in domestic politics, the treatment of Tibet, remember them, and the Uyghurs, and the threats against Taiwan, well, given all of that, everything else, the ships, the aggression, the bullying, and your demands that we muzzle our democracy, remember those points of grievance? Well, I think the Prime Minister really ought to say, if he's going to say that Donald Trump's tariffs are not the action of a friend, well, whatever we are with China, he should have the willingness and the strength to say all of this other stuff, that's not on. And even if there is a buck in it, it might not be worth the effort.